So everybody has a book? Is it working for you? What's the phrase? It works if you work it. Yes. Remember I said we're building a consciousness of spiritual healing. That means you build a firm foundation within your own mind, that you accept the concept of spiritual healing, that you know deep within your being that spiritual healing is a reality, that you no longer think of things as incurable, but simply as errors to be corrected, changes to be made in thinking, feeling, attitudes, and concepts. The truth of being is we are all created whole, well, and free. And spiritual healing, what is it? It's only the restoration of a person or other living creature. Spiritual healing works on animals too. I know a lady who does spiritual healing on horses. They're not the racing kind, but if she ever does that, I'm going to ask her for some hot tips. Is every healing spiritual? Yes. Because doctors don't heal. Medicine doesn't heal. They may help create an environment in which you can relax and allow that healing of God to take place, but only God heals. One source, the same source of life. It's important for us to relax into that state of health and wholeness. To no longer, well, you've heard me talk about dis-ease, much like a rubber band, and I didn't prepare and think about this ahead of time, or I would have had, a rubber band up here. Because what's the normal state of a rubber band? If you leave it be, is it not loose and relaxed? Would you not say a rubber band in its normal state is at ease? Then when you wrap it around something to hold things together, you put it under tension. You can stretch it and stretch it. And it stays that way until you let it go, till you release it. So from a state of ease, you put it in dis-ease. All those little molecules are, you can imagine if you were a molecule of rubber in a rubber band thing. How long do I have to stay like this? And then you release it. Do you have to push it back together and beg it to restore itself to ease? Of course not. I've never seen any, I would probably have said, look at that fool trying to push that rubber band back together. You don't have to do that. Its natural state, it reverts to its natural state. But first, all of the outer influences have to be removed from it, right? Well, usually that means it's holding a bundle of something together, and you have to take the stuff out that aren't part of the rubber band, that don't allow the rubber band to be at ease. Spiritual healing is much like that. Now, rubber bands function according to natural law. Everything in this universe functions according to natural law, and so do we. We live according to the laws of life and health, and sometimes when we violate those, when we do violate those, you know what happens, don't you? Stuff happens, that's right. Spiritual healing is a natural phenomenon, and it functions completely under spiritual law. And that means that it is an orderly, natural, consistent process. Remember, law functions everywhere, at all points in time and space, exactly the same. So spiritual healing for Jesus is no different than spiritual healing for you. In the Old Testament, those who were agents of spiritual healing, the prophets, it's no different than it is today. Functions the exact same way. Just as electricity functions no differently today than it did for the first electric light bulb. However, well, crude it may have been. Have you seen the light bulb from ancient Egypt? No? There is a hieroglyph or a carving on a panel of hieroglyphs that looks like, sort of like a banana, and you can see a filament in it, and it's being supported with what looks like a conductor, electrical wires. It looks exactly like a light bulb. And Egyptologists are still scratching. Could it be? They found the things that appear to be batteries from that same period. Oh, we've been about this a long time. Everything functions according to law, and it functions the same way. And it even works through people of every religion and no religion. See, you don't have to be a Baptist for this to work. You don't have to be a lunatic. You don't have to be anything except what you are already created to be, a child of God. It is not about religion. It is spiritual, not religious. There's a story in the New Testament, the one that's in the 8th chapter of Luke. While he was still speaking, a man from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." That's kind of a statement of finality, right? Your daughter is dead. There's nothing you can do. Don't bother the teacher. But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear. Only believe, and she shall be well." And when he came to the house, he permitted no one to enter with him, except Peter and John and James, and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and bewailing her. But he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he had directed that something should be given her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. It's a wonderful story. First off, there's some elements of the culture when it said they were weeping and bewailing her. Very natural grieving process in the Middle East. They would even hire professionals to come and grieve and weep. Yes. So that all of this was going on, and it is amidst all of this that he said, "Shh, get out." And who did he allow to stay? The parents, of course. But then Peter, John, and James. Peter, John, and James. 3 of the 12 disciples. 3 of the 12 faculties within man were present. Faith, Peter. Love, John. That idea of unity, oneness, completeness, connection to the very source of healing power. And then James, which is judgment, right judgment. Those were present with the man Jesus. He was looking through the eyes of faith. He was judging correctly. She is not dead, she is sleeping. In other words, this is not an incurable situation. And then, in every healing, when there's a healer involved, there's some connection, unity, oneness, which is the love, that connection. He makes 3 important statements. The first one is, do not fear, only believe, and she will be well. Do not fear. Do not fear, because faith must be present. If you are having fear, yeah, faith is present, but in the wrong thing. Your faith is placed where if you fear? In something other than God, in something other than good, in something other than life and health and wholeness. The second statement he made is, for she is not dead, but sleeping. There's no lack of life, love, substance, or intelligence anywhere in this universe. And he perceives that with good judgment. He realizes that and speaks that. The third statement he makes is, rise. Child, rise. To arise is to affirm and know that the word goes forth, and it accomplishes whereunto it is sent. There's a great lesson here in spiritual healing. The 3 faculties you need: faith, love, judgment. Yeah, I know we have faith, but where's it put? Where has it invested? The love, the connection to the source. And if you happen to be praying with another, feeling that connection with the other. And then the good judgment that knows this is curable, because the natural inheritance from God is health and wholeness. And God is the source of all spiritual healing. Now, I've been asked, why were the parents told to tell no one what had happened? Well, suppose you came here next Sunday and you received the absolute instantaneous spiritual healing of your life. That'd be pretty glorious, wouldn't it? And you couldn't wait to get out of here to go tell somebody. You want to tell your family. You want to tell everybody you know about this wonderful thing that happened to you. And how many of you think you're going to hear, what? You really believe that? Oh, come on, don't be silly. It was just this, or it was just that. Isn't that what you're likely to hear? Of course. And what does that do to your faith? That can begin to turn your faith towards something else than the healing, than the health, than the wholeness. There's a mighty healing power, and it flows much like electricity. This place with these nice artificial fabric carpets in the winter, we're shocking ourselves left and right. Walk from front of the building up here on the stage in the winter with the right shoes on, and you can shock yourself silly because those electrons move from high potential to low. Well, scuffing along the carpet, you're picking up the electrons, and then you become at a high potential. You touch something metal, it's at low potential. The power moves. We can see spiritual healing working much like the flow of electricity. It's energy, God energy, life energy, and it flows into and through us all the time. There have been those who have said you live in the sea of this energy, and you're appropriating that life energy. If you don't appropriate enough, if you're not open and receptive to it enough, then you run out. It's much like that first miracle at the wedding of Canaan, you know? Wine, it can be a symbol of life. And the life ran out. But Jesus showed that there's plenty if you have the consciousness of it and you connect to it. You can draw all that you need. A story that kind of demonstrates that principle of spiritual healing flowing much like electrical energy is from Mark, the 5th chapter. There was a woman who had had a flow of blood for 12 years. Well, that's a long time, don't you think? It's said that she went to many doctors and she spent all her money on doctors, and perhaps each doctor talked about what a quack the one before had been. And there are folks who today do that same thing, go to doctor to doctor to doctor, and oftentimes it makes them sicker. So she kind of came to the end of her endurance. She had suffered much under many physicians and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I shall be made well." Now, there's a little Middle Eastern culture here. She's actually touching, some Gospels speak of it as the hem of his garments. There were tassels on the Jewish men's robes, blue tassels at the four corners. And this is what she was touching. It was believed that the tassels of a holy man's robe had healing power. So immediately the hemorrhage ceased, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. She felt it. She felt the energy move, but so did Jesus. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone forth from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" He felt the energy move. It represents any one of us, any person, any one of us who has some belief in healing and faith in the power of God to heal illness. Now, we don't have to understand the entire healing process in order to be healed any more than we have to understand the chemical action of a medication. You don't understand how your pills work when you take them. It's not necessary. The only thing required is to make a sincere effort to have faith in this divine process. Well, the woman had been seeking outer forms of healing for 12 years with no result. It was time to touch the belief in healing power, in the healing power of God working through Jesus, which represents Christ in you. Touch that center of your being. Just the touch. Touch that still place within where you realize and know the Father and I are one. I am one with God life, and healing flows. I know it would be wonderful if every healing was instantaneous. Boom, poof, like a piece of flash paper going up in flames. Have you ever written on flash paper? And you've seen magicians use it, right? It just goes up in flames instantly. That would be lovely if every healing were that way. Well, the healing part, yeah, but the manifestation of healing sometimes take time for us to release what is necessary to become comfortable with the whole healing process. Sometimes it takes time. You see examples of that in the Gospels where one man who had issues with his vision, he had to go to Jesus twice. He got better, and then he got healed. So know that spiritual healing is possible. It's possible for you. There are some barriers to spiritual healing, and you'll recognize them. They're all the negatives: fear, distrust, guilt. There are folks who I have known over the years who felt that an illness was punishment for something. Well, that's not true. They're not worthy. That's not true. God's will is always for a fuller expression of itself in you and in your life. Now, this early part of the chapter, read it several times this week to get it really into your mind. Start to begin to visualize this healing happening.